the verdict. "Mr. Green, I'm sorry." Anthony Green stared at the doctor across the desk, his jaw tightening. The words were familiar. Too familiar. In fact, he could probably recite the rest of the speech himself. The doctor adjusted his glasses and pushed a folder across the desk. "We ran the tests twice to eliminate any possibility of error." Anthony didn't reach for the file. He already knew what was inside. The same thing that had been inside every other report for the last 15 years. The same thing that had destroyed every serious relationship he had ever tried to build. The same thing that had turned him into the subject of whispers among the elite. The same thing that had made him the greatest disappointment in the Green family. "Your condition hasn't changed." There it was. Anthony released a bitter laugh. Of course it hadn't changed. Why would it? Nothing ever changed. Not the diagnosis. Not the pitying looks. Not the disappointment. Not the loneliness. "Just tell me," he said quietly. "Am I still sterile?" The doctor hesitated before nodding. Yes. Silence filled the room. A silence Anthony had grown used to. Most men walked into hospitals worried they might receive bad news. Anthony walked in already knowing what the bad news would be. He was 35 years old. A billionaire. The heir to one of the largest family fortunes in the country. And according to every medical report he'd ever received, he would never have children. The doctor slid the folder closer. Anthony finally looked down. The word seemed to leap off the page. Sterile. Even after all these years, seeing it still felt like a knife twisting inside his chest. The doctor cleared his throat. There are options available these days. Anthony laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because he was tired. Tired of hearing about options. Tired of hearing about hope. Tired of hearing about miracles. If miracles existed, they certainly hadn't found him. "Thank you for your time." He stood before the doctor could continue. The older man looked sympathetic. Anthony hated that look. Everyone looked at him like that. Like he was broken. Like he was less of a man. Like he deserved their pity. He left the office without another word. Outside, rain was pouring from the sky. The city looked gray. Cold. Miserable. Anthony didn't bother opening the umbrella his driver rushed to hand him. The rain soaked his expensive suit within seconds. He didn't care. For a moment, he simply stood there and let the water hit his face. Nobody could tell the difference between rain and tears anyway. Not that he was crying. He'd stopped crying years ago. The day he realized the diagnosis wasn't going away. The day he realized he'd never hear a child call him dad. The day he gave up imagining a family of his own. His phone buzzed. Anthony glanced at the screen. Grandfather. He considered ignoring the call. Instead, he answered. "You aren't forgetting tonight's dinner, are you?" his grandfather asked. Anthony closed his eyes. The annual Green family gathering. Exactly what he needed after spending his morning being reminded that he'd never have children. "I'll be there." "You sound miserable." "I just left the hospital." A pause followed. His grandfather sighed. Anthony already knew what the old man was thinking. The same thing everyone always thought. Poor Anthony. Poor sterile Anthony. The heir who couldn't continue the bloodline. "I'll see you tonight," his grandfather said softly before hanging up. Anthony lowered the phone. The bloodline. That was always what it came back to. Not his achievements. Not the billions he had generated for the company. Not the thousands of employees whose livelihoods depended on him. None of that mattered. Because no matter how successful he became, he couldn't provide the one thing the Green family valued most. An heir. A future. A child carrying the Green name. By the time he arrived at Green Manor that evening, the rain had intensified. Luxury cars filled the circular driveway. Laughter echoed from inside the mansion. The moment Anthony entered, conversations shifted. Subtle. But noticeable. They always did. His cousins greeted him. His aunts smiled. His uncles shook his hand. Yet behind every interaction lurked the same thing. Pity. His uncle Victor approached carrying a glass of wine. The smile on his face looked genuine. It wasn't. Anthony. Victor exclaimed. There you are. Anthony nodded politely. Uncle. Victor's eyes traveled briefly over him. You look exhausted. I've had a long day. I heard. Of course he had. News traveled fast in the family. Especially news about Anthony's infertility. Victor lowered his voice. Any good news this time? Anthony's expression hardened. No. Victor sighed dramatically. That's unfortunate. Liar. If anything, Victor looked pleased. Before Anthony could respond, someone tapped a champagne glass. The room quieted. His grandfather rose to his feet. The family patriarch smiled warmly. Thank you all for coming. Applause followed. The speech began. Anthony barely listened. Until one sentence made his stomach tighten. Our family's future depends on the next generation. The room erupted into discussion. Several cousins proudly showed photos of their children. Others discussed pregnancies. Baby names. Schools. Family legacies. Anthony suddenly felt like he couldn't breathe. Then came the comment. Careless. Cruel. At least most of us are contributing to the future of the family. Laughter followed. Anthony looked up. His cousin Marcus smirked openly. Someone else chuckled. Another person looked away awkwardly. Nobody needed clarification. Everyone knew exactly who Marcus was talking about. The sterile heir. Anthony set down his drink. For a moment, the room seemed to blur around him. Then Marcus added the final blow. Imagine inheriting billions with nobody to leave them to. More laughter. This time louder. Anthony stood. The room fell silent. Without a word, he turned and walked out. The rain greeted him once more. He welcomed it. Behind him, the lights of Green Manor glowed brightly. Ahead of him stretched darkness. And for the first time in a very long time, Anthony found himself asking a question he had spent years avoiding. What was the point of having everything, if he had nobody to call family? Little did Anthony Green know, somewhere in the city, fate had already begun preparing an answer. And that answer would arrive in the form of 3 children who didn't yet exist. Chapter 2. My mother's last wish. If your mother could see what you've done to her company, she'd be ashamed of you. The words left Daisy Hart's mouth before she could stop them. The boardroom fell silent. Across the polished conference table, Richard Hart's face darkened instantly. The man had once been a loving father. At least that's what Daisy used to believe. Now she wasn't so sure. Richard slowly set down the financial report he had been reviewing. You've become very disrespectful. Daisy laughed. A short, bitter sound. Disrespectful. She pushed a stack of documents toward him. The company has lost 3 major contracts this year. She pointed at another page. Revenue is down. Another. Employees are leaving. Another. And somehow your wife has managed to buy another mansion. The atmosphere became tense. Vanessa Hart, seated beside Richard, stiffened immediately. Her perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her designer handbag. Careful, Daisy, she warned. Daisy turned toward her. For years she had tried. Tried being polite. Tried being understanding. Tried pretending Vanessa wasn't the reason her parents' marriage had collapsed. Today she was tired. Nobody asked you. Vanessa gasped. Richard slammed his hand on the table. Enough. The sound echoed through the room. Several board members looked away awkwardly. Daisy wasn't surprised. Nobody ever wanted to take sides. Not when money was involved. Not when Richard Hart controlled everything. Everything except one thing. The shares her mother had left behind. Shares that legally belonged to Daisy. Shares she still couldn't access. Because of a single condition. A condition that had haunted her for years. Her mother had always believed family mattered more than money. Unfortunately, she had taken that belief to the grave. Daisy, Richard said through clenched teeth, you have no authority here. The statement hurt more than it should have. Not because it was true. Because it shouldn't have been. Hart Corporation had been built by her mother. Not him. Every building. Every contract. Every employee. Every success. All of it had started with her mother's vision. Yet somehow Richard had turned himself into king. While Daisy remained locked out. A visitor in her own inheritance. She stood from her chair. I'm done watching this happen. Daisy. No. Her voice cut through the room. For a moment everyone froze. Even Richard. I spent years hoping you would do the right thing. She looked directly at her father. You never did. Then she looked at Vanessa. And neither did you. Without waiting for a response, Daisy grabbed her bag and walked out. The moment the elevator doors closed behind her, she released a shaky breath. Her chest hurt. Not because of the company. Not because of the money. Because once upon a time she had loved her father. Now every conversation felt like a battlefield. By the time she arrived home, darkness had fallen. The penthouse overlooked the city skyline. Most people would have considered it luxurious. Daisy considered it lonely. The silence greeted her immediately. No husband. No children. No family. Just another evening alone. She kicked off her heels and headed straight for the study. A large portrait hung on the wall. Her mother. Beautiful. Elegant. Strong. Daisy stopped in front of it. As she always did after a difficult day. Hi, Mom. The room remained silent. She smiled sadly. I got into another fight with Dad. Still nothing. The smile faded. I miss you. Her eyes burned. She hated crying. Especially over something she couldn't change. But sometimes the grief still caught her off guard. Even after all these years. A few minutes later she opened a drawer. Inside sat a thick envelope. The one thing she almost never looked at. Her mother's will. Daisy had memorized every word years ago. Yet she still unfolded the document. Still read it. Still hoped the words would somehow change. They never did. Her gaze settled on the clause she hated most. In the event of my death, controlling shares shall transfer to my daughter Daisy Hart upon marriage or upon becoming the legal guardian of a dependent child. Daisy stared at the sentence. Marriage. Or a child. The condition that had trapped her for years. She wasn't against love. She simply refused to marry for money. Too many people already did. Including her father. The thought made her laugh bitterly. Her mother had probably intended the clause to encourage family. Instead it had become a prison. Daisy folded the document and leaned back in her chair. Marriage was out of the question. The idea of marrying some random man simply to unlock her inheritance made her skin crawl. That left only one option. A child. The thought lingered. For the first time, she didn't immediately dismiss it. She was 30 years old. Successful. Financially secure. Independent. Why couldn't she become a mother? Without a husband. Without waiting for some perfect love story. Without depending on anyone. The more she thought about it, the more the idea made sense. Her pulse quickened. For years she had viewed the clause as a burden. Now she was beginning to see it differently. A child wouldn't simply help her claim the company. A child would give her something she genuinely wanted. A family. A reason to come home. A future. A small smile appeared on her face. The first genuine smile she'd had all day. She reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered above the screen. Then she opened a search page. Fertility clinics. Several results appeared immediately. Her heart raced. Maybe. Just maybe. This was the answer she'd been searching for. Little did Daisy know that one simple decision was about to collide with the life of a man she had never met. And change both their futures forever. The choice. You want to do what? Daisy winced and moved the phone slightly away from her ear. Her best friend had always been dramatic. Lower your voice. I will not lower my voice. Sophia practically shrieked. You're telling me you're planning to have a baby by yourself? Daisy smiled despite herself. She had expected this reaction. They had been friends for over 15 years. Sophia was one of the few people who genuinely cared about her. Which was exactly why Daisy had called her. I said I'm considering it. That's even worse. Daisy laughed softly. Sophia. No. Sophia. No. Daisy shook her head. I knew calling you was a mistake. It was. They both laughed. The tension eased slightly. Sophia eventually sighed. Okay. Explain. Daisy walked toward the large windows overlooking the city. Morning sunlight flooded the penthouse. Unlike yesterday, she felt strangely calm. Like she had finally made a decision. I don't want to get married just to access my inheritance. Good. And I don't want to spend years waiting for some perfect man who may never come. Fair. And I've always wanted children. Silence. Then Sophia spoke again. More softly this time. Do you really want this? Daisy's smile faded. The question struck deeper than she expected. Did she? She looked around the quiet penthouse. The empty dining table. The unused guest rooms. The silence that greeted her every evening. For years she had told herself she was happy alone. Independent. Successful. Strong. Yet every time she visited friends with families, something inside her ached. Every time she saw a mother holding her child's hand. Every time she watched a father carrying his sleeping daughter. A part of her wondered what it would feel like. To be someone's home. To be someone's safe place. To be needed. Yes. The answer came easier than she expected. More than I realized. Sophia was quiet for several seconds. Then she said something surprising. Then do it. Daisy blinked. That's it. That's it. I thought you were against it. I am. Daisy frowned. That makes no sense. Sophia laughed. I think you're completely insane. There it is. But I also know when you've made up your mind. Daisy smiled. Her friend knew her too well. When are you going? I have an appointment this afternoon. What? I made it this morning. Sophia groaned loudly. You're impossible. I've been told that. Frequently. They both laughed again. For the first time in months, Daisy felt hopeful. Maybe this was crazy. Maybe people would judge her. Maybe her father would have a heart attack when he found out. But for once she didn't care. This wasn't about him. This wasn't about Heart Corporation. This was about her future. And she was tired of waiting for permission to live her life. By noon, Daisy found herself seated inside one of the most prestigious fertility clinics in the country. The waiting area looked more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility. Elegant furniture. Fresh flowers. Soft music. Everything designed to put patients at ease. It wasn't working. Her nerves were running wild. Ms. Hart. She immediately stood. A smiling nurse approached. This way, please. Daisy followed her down a long hallway. Minutes later she entered an office. A woman in her 50s greeted her warmly. "Good afternoon, Daisy." "Good afternoon." The doctor motioned for her to sit. "Tell me what brings you here." Daisy took a deep breath. Then she explained everything. Her mother's will. The inheritance. Her desire to become a mother. Her decision to remain single. The doctor listened carefully. Without judgment. Without interruption. When Daisy finished, the woman smiled. "I think your reasons are valid." Relief flooded through her. "Really?" "Of course." The doctor folded her hands. Many women choose motherhood independently these days. Daisy felt some of her anxiety disappear. "We'll run the necessary tests," the doctor continued. "If everything looks good, we can proceed." The appointment lasted nearly 2 hours. By the end, Daisy left feeling lighter. Hopeful. Excited. Terrified. But mostly excited. For the first time in years, she felt like she was moving towards something. Instead of merely surviving. Several floors below, in a secure section of the building inaccessible to patients, another meeting was taking place. A laboratory technician frowned at a computer screen. Something wasn't right. She checked the records again. Then again. Her heartbeat accelerated. That's impossible. The name on the donor file made her freeze. Anthony Green. The sample had been stored months ago. Part of a private fertility preservation program. Everything should have remained untouched. Yet according to the system, a transfer request had just been processed. The technician stared at the monitor. Confusion spread across her face. She didn't remember authorizing anything. Nor should anyone else have. A cold feeling settled in her stomach. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Unfortunately, before she could investigate further, another employee entered the room. "Is there a problem?" The technician quickly minimized the file. "No." But even as she said the word, unease lingered. Because deep down she knew. Somewhere inside the clinic, a mistake had just occurred. A mistake that would soon change multiple lives forever. And nobody had noticed it yet. The mistake. Daisy had never imagined that creating a life could involve so much paperwork. Consent forms. Medical questionnaires. Legal agreements. Financial disclosures. By the time she finished signing the last document, her wrist hurt. The fertility coordinator smiled. "Congratulations." Daisy looked up. For what? For taking the first step. The simple statement made her stomach flutter. For the first time, everything felt real. This wasn't an idea anymore. It wasn't a plan. It was happening. The coordinator handed her another folder. Inside were treatment schedules, medication instructions, and appointment dates. A roadmap to motherhood. Daisy stared at the papers. Her future suddenly felt tangible. Reachable. She couldn't stop smiling. Across town, Anthony Green was having a much worse day. "Cancel it." His assistant blinked. "Sir." "The charity gala. You've spent 3 months planning that event." Anthony loosened his tie. "I don't care." The assistant hesitated. "Is this because of yesterday?" Anthony didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. The humiliation from the family dinner still lingered. Marcus's words had replayed in his head all night. Imagine inheriting billions with nobody to leave them to. The worst part? Anthony couldn't even argue. Because Marcus was right. What good was a legacy if it died with him? The thought made his chest tighten. "Leave the files." The assistant quietly placed the documents on the desk and exited. Anthony stared out the window. 35 floors below, the city moved normally. People rushed to work. Parents walked children to school. Families existed everywhere. Except in his life. His phone buzzed. A text message appeared. From his Uncle Victor. Dinner this weekend. Family only. Anthony immediately deleted it. Lately, even looking at his relatives irritated him. Especially Victor. There was something about the man's constant sympathy that felt false. Like an actor playing a role. Anthony couldn't explain it. But the older he got, the less genuine it seemed. Meanwhile, at the fertility clinic, chaos was quietly brewing. The laboratory technician from the previous day sat staring at a screen. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. The records still didn't make sense. She opened the donor database again. Anthony Green. Everything looked normal. Until she compared timestamps. Then her blood ran cold. Oh no. A transfer authorization had occurred. One she never approved. One that shouldn't exist. Her hands trembled as she reviewed the logs. The sample had already been processed. Already assigned. Already used. The realization hit her like a truck. Someone's procedure had already happened. Someone's future had already changed. Please tell me I'm wrong. She checked again. And again. The answer remained the same. She wasn't wrong. A mistake had been made. A catastrophic one. The door suddenly opened. The laboratory director entered. What are you working on? The technician swallowed. Hard. For a moment she considered telling him everything. Instead she hesitated. That hesitation would become one of the biggest mistakes of her life. Because the director's expression changed the moment he saw the file. Anthony Green. The name meant something. The director quickly masked his reaction. But not quickly enough. The technician noticed. Do you know him? The director smiled. Everyone knows Anthony Green. Then he calmly walked closer. What seems to be the issue? The technician explained. Every detail. Every discrepancy. Every concern. The more she spoke, the paler she became. By the time she finished, silence filled the room. The director stared at the screen. His face unreadable. Finally he spoke. Delete it. The technician froze. What? The records. I can't do that. You're mistaken. No, I'm not. The director's expression hardened. For several seconds neither spoke. Then he lowered his voice. Do you understand what would happen if this became public? The technician stared at him. A patient deserves to know. A patient deserves a successful procedure. The director closed the file. Which they received. Her eyes widened. You can't be serious. The procedure worked. The technician felt sick. This is fraud. It's survival. The director stood. The clinic's reputation would be destroyed. So we're lying. We're protecting everyone involved. Including ourselves. The unspoken words hung in the air. The technician looked at the file again. A terrible feeling settled over her. Something was deeply wrong. Not just the mistake. The cover-up. The speed with which the director wanted it buried. As though he wasn't surprised. As though he expected it. As though he was protecting something bigger. Or someone. Weeks later, Daisy sat inside her penthouse bathroom staring at a small white stick. Her heart hammered violently. She looked away. Then looked back. The result hadn't changed. 2 lines. Positive. For several seconds she couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Then tears filled her eyes. Happy tears. The kind she hadn't cried in years. A trembling laugh escaped her lips. Oh my God. She pressed a hand against her stomach. There was no baby bump yet. No visible sign. Nothing to indicate her life had changed forever. And yet everything had. A child. Her child. Her future. Her family. The dream she had barely dared imagine was finally becoming real. She reached for her phone. The first number she called was Sophia. The moment her friend answered, Daisy burst into tears. Sophia panicked instantly. Daisy. I'm pregnant. Silence. Then screaming. Very loud screaming. Daisy laughed through her tears. For the first time in a very long time, she felt genuinely happy. Completely unaware that somewhere else in the city, a billionaire who believed he could never become a father had unknowingly just become one. And fate wasn't finished with either of them yet. 3 heartbeats. Daisy couldn't stop smiling. It had been 3 weeks since she discovered she was pregnant. 3 weeks of secretly touching her stomach. 3 weeks of reading parenting articles at midnight. 3 weeks of talking to a baby that couldn't hear her yet. Or so she thought. This morning was her first major scan. And despite all her excitement, she was nervous. Terrified, actually. What if something is wrong? Sophia rolled her eyes as they entered the clinic. You've asked me that 17 times. Only 17. 22. Daisy laughed. Traitor. I'm a realist. The 2 women entered the elevator. Despite Sophia's teasing, Daisy appreciated having her there. Her friend had attended every appointment. Bought baby books. Researched strollers. And somehow become even more excited than Daisy herself. The elevator doors opened. Ready? Sophia asked. Daisy took a deep breath. No. Good. What? Nobody is ever ready. Together they headed toward the imaging department. Several floors below, someone was panicking. The laboratory technician who had discovered the sample mix-up couldn't sleep anymore. Every day she came to work feeling sick. Every day she considered reporting the truth. And every day fear stopped her. The clinic director had made his position clear. The mistake would remain buried. Forever. Unfortunately for him, she wasn't the only person asking questions anymore. The technician had recently requested access to archived donor files. What she found terrified her. Anthony Green's file wasn't merely unusual. It had been accessed repeatedly over the years. By multiple doctors. Multiple facilities. Multiple administrators. Far more than normal. Almost as if someone had been monitoring him. Or manipulating his records. The discovery left her deeply unsettled. What if the IVF mistake wasn't the only secret surrounding Anthony Green? There's the baby. Daisy immediately burst into tears. The sonographer laughed softly. It's okay. Daisy nodded while crying harder. Sophia handed her tissues. You've become emotional. I'm pregnant. Good point. The room filled with laughter. The sonographer adjusted the monitor. The tiny image flickered. Daisy stared at the screen. A life. A real life. Growing inside her. The reality overwhelmed her. For years she had felt alone. For years she had fought every battle by herself. Now she wasn't alone anymore. The thought brought fresh tears. The sonographer continued scanning. Then her expression changed. Just slightly. But enough for Daisy to notice. Is something wrong? The sonographer didn't answer immediately. Instead she moved the device again. Then again. A small smile appeared on her face. Oh. Daisy's heart stopped. Oh what? Sophia sat up straighter. The sonographer looked between them. Then she laughed. Daisy. Suddenly Daisy was certain something was wrong. Her breathing accelerated. What is it? The sonographer pointed toward the screen. Do you see that? Daisy squinted. See what? That little heartbeat. Relief flooded her. Okay. Then the sonographer pointed elsewhere. And that one. Daisy blinked. What? Another heartbeat. A second tiny flickering light. Sophia's mouth fell open. The sonographer moved the scan again. And that one. The room went silent. Completely silent. For several seconds nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Daisy stared at the screen. 1 heartbeat. 2 heartbeats. 3 heartbeats. No. The word escaped automatically. The sonographer laughed. Yes. No. Definitely yes. Sophia grabbed Daisy's arm. Oh my God. No. Daisy. No. Daisy. No. The sonographer finally delivered the verdict. Congratulations. Daisy stared blankly. Congratulations. The woman smiled. You're having triplets. The world stopped. Triplets. 3 babies. 3. Not 1. 3. Daisy looked at Sophia. Sophia looked at Daisy. Then both women screamed simultaneously. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Daisy covered her face. Triplets. Actual triplets. Her mind couldn't process it. She had come expecting 1 baby. 1 crib. 1 stroller. 1 tiny human. Instead, life had apparently decided to skip several steps. Sophia was crying now. Daisy was crying. Even the sonographer looked emotional. 3 tiny heartbeats echoed through the room. Strong. Steady. Beautiful. Daisy listened. And something changed inside her. Suddenly the inheritance didn't matter. The company didn't matter. Richard didn't matter. Vanessa didn't matter. Nothing mattered except those 3 tiny lives. Her children. Across the city, Anthony Green sat alone in his penthouse. The rain tapped softly against the windows. A glass of whiskey rested untouched beside him. His phone buzzed. A message from his grandfather. When are you finally going to settle down and give me great-grandchildren? Anthony stared at the screen. A familiar ache spread through his chest. Without responding, he locked the phone. The irony wasn't lost on him. Somewhere in the city, thousands of fathers were putting their children to bed. Meanwhile, he couldn't even imagine such a future. Or so he believed. Because at that exact moment, 3 tiny hearts were beating. 3 children carrying his blood. 3 futures he didn't know existed. And fate was quietly preparing the day they would finally meet. The news that changed everything. Dad, I'm pregnant. The fork slipped from Richard Hart's hand. It landed on the dining table with a loud clang. Across from him, Vanessa froze. For several seconds, neither spoke. Neither moved. Neither blinked. Daisy calmly took another sip of her juice. She had expected shock. Just not this much. What did you say? Richard finally asked. I'm pregnant. Vanessa's smile looked strained. That's wonderful news. Liar. Daisy could practically see the panic behind the woman's eyes. Richard recovered first. When did this happen? Daisy nearly laughed. The question was ridiculous. Several months ago. And the father? There it was. The question everyone asked. The question she knew was coming. There isn't one. Richard frowned. That's impossible. No, actually, it's very possible. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. Then realization dawned on her face. Her eyes widened. You used IVF. Daisy smiled. Correct. The silence that followed felt deafening. Richard slowly leaned back in his chair. For years he had relied on one thing. The inheritance clause. As long as Daisy remained unmarried and childless, control of Hart Corporation remained firmly in his hands. Now everything was changing. Fast. Too fast. Why would you do something so reckless? He demanded. Daisy almost laughed. Reckless. Coming from a man who had destroyed his marriage and handed company positions to his mistress. That was rich. I wanted children. Richard's expression darkened. No. The word came out colder than she expected. Daisy blinked. No. No daughter of mine is going to raise children without a husband. The statement irritated her immediately. Dad, I'm 30. I don't care. I'm financially independent. I don't care. I own multiple properties. I don't care. Daisy's patience snapped. Well, I care. The dining room fell silent. For years she had tolerated his interference. His criticism. His manipulation. Not anymore. Not where her children were concerned. She slowly placed a hand over her stomach. A protective instinct she hadn't known existed immediately surfaced. These babies are staying. Richard's jaw tightened. Vanessa suddenly spoke. Babies. Daisy smiled. The first genuine smile she'd had since arriving. Triplets. The glass Vanessa was holding slipped from her fingers. It shattered across the floor. Nobody noticed. Because everyone was staring at Daisy. Triplets. 3 children. 3 legal dependents. 3 living, breathing keys to the inheritance clause. Richard looked like someone had punched him. Good. For the first time in years, Daisy felt victorious. Congratulations, Dad. His eyes narrowed. For what? You're going to be a grandfather. Then she stood. And left. Before either of them could recover. The moment Daisy's car disappeared from the driveway, Richard exploded. This can't happen. Vanessa looked equally disturbed. What are we going to do? Richard paced furiously. Years. Years of planning. Years of control. Years of keeping Daisy away from the company. Now everything was at risk. A child would have been bad enough. 3 children. Disaster. The inheritance clause would become active the moment the babies were born. Control of Hart Corporation would begin shifting. Back to Daisy. Back to the rightful heir. Richard slammed his fist onto the desk. No. Vanessa hesitated. What if we challenge the will? Richard shook his head. The courts already upheld it. What if we convince her to give up? He laughed bitterly. Neither spoke. They both knew the answer. Daisy Hart never backed down. Meanwhile, across town, another man was learning equally disturbing news. Victor Green sat inside his private office. The room overlooked the city skyline. Expensive. Elegant. Powerful. Exactly how he liked things. His assistant entered carrying a file. Sir. Victor looked up. The clinic. Victor's expression sharpened. Immediately. Which clinic? The assistant handed him a document. The fertility clinic we've been monitoring. Victor opened the file. A strange feeling settled in his chest. For years he had quietly ensured Anthony remained out of the inheritance race. Every doctor. Every report. Every test. Carefully controlled. Carefully managed. Everything had gone according to plan. Until recently. Questions were being asked. Records were being accessed. Employees were becoming nervous. Victor hated surprises. What did you find? The assistant hesitated. Then pointed toward one name. Daisy Hart. Victor frowned. The name meant nothing to him. Yet. Who is she? A Hart Corporation heiress. Victor's eyes narrowed. And why should I care? The assistant swallowed. She's pregnant. Victor looked unimpressed. So. The assistant shifted nervously. Then delivered the sentence that made Victor sit upright. With triplets. For the first time in years, genuine unease crossed Victor's face. Because something about the situation felt wrong. Very wrong. And deep down, his instincts were warning him. The secret he had buried 15 years ago might not stay buried forever. What money couldn't buy. Anthony Green hated hospitals. The smell. The silence. The memories. Every corridor reminded him of another test. Another report. Another doctor delivering the same verdict. Sterile. The word followed him everywhere. Even now. Mr. Green. Anthony looked up. A young boy stood beside him. Perhaps 7 years old. Holding a toy airplane. The child's mother hurried over immediately. Tommy, don't bother people. It's okay. Anthony forced a smile. The boy stared at him. Are you rich? The question caught him off guard. His mother looked horrified. Oh my God, Tommy. Anthony laughed. For the first time all day. A little. The boy's eyes widened. Like billionaire rich. His mother looked ready to disappear. Anthony smiled. Something like that. Tommy considered this carefully. Then asked. Does being rich make you happy? The question hit harder than any business negotiation ever had. Anthony found himself staring at the child. How did he answer that? The truth? Or the version people expected? Before he could decide, Tommy spoke again. My dad says rich people don't have problems. Anthony's smile faded slightly. If only that were true. Tommy's mother finally dragged him away while apologizing profusely. Anthony assured her it was fine. Yet long after they left, the conversation remained in his mind. Does being rich make you happy? No. Not always. Money could buy houses. Cars. Companies. Private jets. Entire islands. But there were things it couldn't buy. Time. Love. Family. Children. The things Anthony wanted most. Later that afternoon, Anthony visited Green Holdings headquarters. The towering building carried his family's name. A legacy stretching back generations. One day it would likely belong to him. Yet lately that thought brought little comfort. His grandfather's health was declining. Family members had started circling like vultures. Everyone wanted power. Everyone wanted control. Everyone wanted the throne. Especially Victor. Anthony entered the executive boardroom. The meeting began immediately. Acquisitions. Investments. Expansion plans. Numbers filled the room. Normally he thrived in this environment. Today he struggled to focus. Until one of the directors made an innocent comment. My daughter graduates next week. The room immediately erupted into conversation. Proud parents sharing stories. Photos. Achievements. Memories. Anthony remained silent. Watching. Listening. Pretending not to care. The familiar ache returned. He hated it. Not because he envied them. Because he genuinely didn't. He was happy for them. What hurt was knowing he would never experience those moments himself. Or so he believed. That evening, Anthony visited the only person he trusted completely. His grandfather. The old man sat on the mansion veranda watching the sunset. Despite his age, his eyes remained sharp. Perceptive. Dangerously so. You're brooding again. Anthony sat beside him. Maybe. The older man chuckled. Thanks. You're welcome. Anthony couldn't help smiling. His grandfather had always been blunt. It was one of the few things Anthony appreciated. For several moments neither spoke. Then the old man asked quietly. The hospital again? Anthony nodded. His grandfather sighed. The sound carried genuine sadness. I wish things had been different. So do I. The older man looked toward the gardens. When your grandmother was alive, she always dreamed of grandchildren. Anthony swallowed. The words hurt. Not because of blame. Because of love. His grandparents had always supported him. Yet even they couldn't change reality. I tried. His voice came out rough. His grandfather looked at him. Confused. Anthony stared at the fading sunset. I really tried. The confession surprised even him. Years of buried frustration suddenly surfaced. I tried accepting it. His hands clenched. I tried moving on. A bitter laugh escaped him. I tried pretending it didn't matter. The old man remained silent. Listening. Anthony continued. I watched relationships end because women wanted families. His throat tightened. I watched people pity me. He looked away. I watched everyone else move forward while I stayed stuck. The words poured out before he could stop them. Do you know what the worst part is? Anthony smiled sadly. The worst part isn't being sterile. The older man frowned. No. Anthony shook his head. The worst part is wondering what kind of father I would have been. The silence that followed felt heavy. Painful. Real. For a moment, Anthony looked younger. Not like a billionaire. Not like an heir. Just a man grieving a future he believed he'd lost. His grandfather placed a hand on his shoulder. You would have been a good father. Anthony laughed softly. We'll never know. The old man's expression became strange. Almost sad. As though he wanted to say something. Then thought better of it. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from inside the mansion. Victor Green. Standing behind a window. Listening. Observing. Calculating. His expression remained unreadable. But deep inside, unease continued growing. The fertility clinic. The missing records. The pregnant heiress. The questions. Too many things were happening at once. And Victor hated losing control. Especially when Anthony Green was involved. Because if there was one thing Victor had learned over the years, it was this. Secrets stayed buried only until fate decided otherwise. And fate was moving faster than anyone realized. A mother's promise. Daisy stood in the middle of the nursery and smiled. The room was still unfinished. Paint cans occupied one corner. Furniture remained wrapped in protective plastic. Yet somehow, it was already her favorite room in the penthouse. Her hand drifted to her stomach. 5 months. The triplets were growing quickly. And so was her attachment to them. Every kick. Every movement. Every heartbeat she heard during appointments made them feel more real. More precious. More hers. The thought brought tears to her eyes. Again. Pregnancy had apparently turned her into an emotional disaster. Daisy. She turned. Sophia stood in the doorway carrying shopping bags. Several shopping bags. Daisy groaned. No. Sophia smiled innocently. Yes. No. They were on sale. You bought the entire store. It was practically free. It absolutely wasn't. Sophia marched into the room. One by one she pulled out tiny baby clothes. Daisy's resolve instantly collapsed. Oh my God. The clothes were ridiculously small. Tiny socks. Tiny hats. Tiny sweaters. Tiny shoes. 3 of everything. Because apparently one baby wasn't enough. Life had decided to give her 3. Sophia grinned. I knew you'd lose the argument. Daisy held up a miniature pair of shoes. The sight hit her unexpectedly. These weren't ideas anymore. Or dreams. Or plans. 3 little people would eventually wear these. 3 children would run through her home. 3 children would call her mom. A lump formed in her throat. Sophia immediately noticed. Oh no. What? You're about to cry again. Daisy burst into tears. See. I hate you. No, you don't. They both laughed. Then cried. Then laughed again. Pregnancy was strange. Later that evening, Daisy sat alone in the nursery. The lights were dim. The city glittered beyond the windows. For the first time all day, the apartment was quiet. Peaceful. She gently rested both hands over her stomach. A kick greeted her immediately. Then another. And another. Daisy smiled. You three are becoming troublemakers. Another kick. She laughed. I haven't even met you yet and you're already ganging up on me. Silence followed. Yet somehow she didn't feel alone. Not anymore. For years she had carried every burden herself. Now everything felt different. Every decision included them. Every plan included them. Every dream included them. The realization made her smile. Then her smile slowly faded. Because another thought had entered her mind. One she rarely allowed herself to explore. The father. Not because she wanted him. Or needed him. But because one day her children would ask questions. Questions she wouldn't know how to answer. Who was he? What was he like? Did he know about us? Did he ever think about us? The uncertainty bothered her. More than she wanted to admit. Still. There was nothing she could do about it. The donor was anonymous. The past was the past. And the future belonged to her children. That was enough. Or at least she hoped it would be. Across the city, Richard Hart was losing sleep. Daisy is becoming a problem. Vanessa looked up from the financial reports spread across the desk. She's always been a problem. Not like this. Richard paced the office. The numbers were terrifying. The moment those children were born, everything changed. The inheritance clause would activate. Control would begin shifting. His power would shrink. His influence would weaken. His empire would disappear. And worst of all, legally, there would be little he could do about it. Vanessa folded her arms. There has to be something. There isn't. Find something. Richard stopped pacing. Slowly, an unpleasant idea began forming. A dangerous one. His expression changed. Vanessa noticed immediately. What? Richard looked toward the window. His voice became quiet. Too quiet. If the children are the problem. Vanessa stared at him. Horrified. Richard. He didn't respond. Richard. Still nothing. For the first time in years, even Vanessa felt uneasy. Because she knew that look. She had seen it before. Whenever Richard wanted something badly enough. Whenever morality became inconvenient. Whenever he convinced himself the end justified the means. Vanessa swallowed. Don't do anything stupid. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. I would never. The lie hung heavily between them. Meanwhile, inside Green Manor, Victor Green sat alone in his study. The fertility clinic records lay spread across his desk. Every new report increased his anxiety. The pregnancy bothered him. Not because of Daisy. Not because of Hart Corporation. Because of timing. The clinic. The investigations. The missing files. The strange employee inquiries. Everything seemed connected. Yet he couldn't see how. And Victor hated mysteries. He preferred certainty. Control. Predictability. For 15 years, he had controlled Anthony's future. Now that control felt fragile. Threatened. As if something was moving beneath the surface. Something he couldn't see. Something dangerous. His phone rang. Victor immediately answered. Talk to me. The voice on the other end sounded nervous. Sir. Victor's stomach tightened. What is it? The clinic employee. His eyes narrowed. What about her? A pause followed. Then came the answer. She's asking too many questions. Victor slowly leaned back in his chair, his expression darkening. Because questions had a way of becoming truths. And truths had a way of destroying everything. Especially secrets as old as his. The call ended. Silence filled the room. Victor stared out the window. For the first time in years, fear crept into his heart. Because somewhere, somehow, fate had begun pulling at the threads of a lie that had lasted 15 years. And once those threads unraveled, everything would fall apart. The woman who knew too much. Martha N. George couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. For 3 days, the sensation had followed her everywhere. At work. At home. Even during her morning commute. At first she had dismissed it as paranoia. Now she wasn't so sure. The fertility clinic's laboratory technician glanced over her shoulder as she exited the building. Nothing. No one. Yet the unease remained. She tightened her grip on her handbag and walked faster. Inside that bag sat a flash drive. A very dangerous flash drive. One she should never have created. One capable of destroying careers. Possibly lives. Because buried within its files was evidence. Evidence that the clinic had altered records. Evidence that someone had accessed Anthony Green's medical history repeatedly over the years. Evidence that the IVF procedure involving Daisy Hart had not occurred legally. And most troubling of all, evidence that multiple powerful individuals appeared connected. The deeper Martha investigated, the less accidental everything seemed. The mix-up should have been random. Instead, it felt suspiciously convenient. Almost deliberate. As if someone had been manipulating records long before Daisy ever walked through the clinic doors. The realization terrified her. Meanwhile, Daisy was experiencing a very different kind of panic. Why are there 3 cribs? Sophia blinked. Because there are 3 babies. I know. Good. Daisy pointed dramatically. But seeing them together makes it feel real. Sophia looked around the nursery. 3 cribs. 3 blankets. 3 stuffed animals. 3 everything. The room was beautiful. Soft cream walls. Elegant furniture. Large windows overlooking the city. A nursery fit for royalty. Yet Daisy stood frozen. Overwhelmed. 3 babies. Still 3. What if I mess up? Sophia laughed. You will. Daisy gasped. What kind of encouragement is that? The honest kind. Daisy threw a pillow at her. Sophia caught it easily. You'll make mistakes. Great. You'll be exhausted. Wonderful. You'll probably cry. I already cry. Exactly. Sophia smiled. You're already prepared. Despite herself, Daisy laughed. The tension eased. A little. Then one of the babies kicked. Hard. Daisy immediately grabbed her stomach. Ouch. Another kick followed. Then another. Sophia's eyes widened. They heard us. They definitely heard us. The 2 women dissolved into laughter. For a moment everything felt perfect. Safe. Peaceful. Neither realized danger was quietly approaching. That same evening, Richard Hart received a phone call. One that immediately ruined his mood. What do you mean the lawyers confirmed it? The attorney's voice remained calm. The will is valid. Richard clenched his jaw. I know the will is valid. Then what exactly are you asking? Richard hated lawyers. Especially when they answered questions with questions. If Daisy gives birth, the inheritance clause activates. Richard closed his eyes. And there's nothing we can do. Legally. The pause lasted several seconds. No. The call ended shortly afterward. Richard remained seated. Fuming. Years of planning. Years of control. Years of enjoying power. All slipping away because of 3 unborn children. His gaze drifted toward the city lights outside. Slowly. Dangerously. His thoughts darkened. If the law couldn't stop Daisy, perhaps something else could. Across town, Anthony Green sat inside a nearly empty restaurant. Dinner remained untouched. His attention focused entirely on the family seated 2 tables away. A father. A mother. 3 young children. The youngest girl couldn't have been older than 5. She climbed onto her father's lap despite clearly being old enough to sit alone. The men laughed and hugged her anyway. Anthony found himself staring. Not because he intended to. Because he couldn't look away. The simplicity of the moment hurt. No wealth. No power. No inheritance. Just family. Something he had wanted his entire life. His phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Family barbecue next weekend. Anthony immediately deleted it. The bitterness surprised even him. Normally he ignored such comments. Tonight they stung. Maybe because he was tired. Maybe because he was lonely. Or maybe because somewhere deep inside, a small part of him still hoped for the impossible. At nearly midnight, Martha finally arrived home. Exhausted. Anxious. Afraid. She locked the door behind her. Then checked it twice. Something wasn't right. The questions she had been asking around the clinic had attracted attention. Too much attention. She knew it. The flash drive remained hidden inside her handbag. Tomorrow she would take it to someone outside the clinic. Someone trustworthy. Someone capable of exposing the truth. Finally. After days of indecision. She had made her choice. No more silence. No more cover-ups. No more lies. She turned off the lights and headed toward her bedroom. Completely unaware that a dark vehicle had been parked across the street for nearly an hour. Waiting. Watching. The engine remained running. Inside sat a man speaking quietly into a phone. She's home. A voice answered. Keep watching. The line went dead. The man settled back into his seat. Eyes fixed on the house. Waiting for instructions. Waiting for an opportunity. Waiting for the woman who knew too much to make a mistake. And somewhere in the darkness, the conspiracy surrounding Anthony Green was beginning to fight back. The baby shower. This is ridiculous. Daisy stood frozen at the entrance of the banquet hall. Pink. Blue. Gold. White. The entire room was decorated with balloons, flowers, ribbons, and enough baby-themed decorations to supply a small country. A giant banner stretched across the far wall. Welcome baby's heart. Daisy immediately covered her mouth. Oh no. Sophia grinned. Oh yes. Tears instantly filled Daisy's eyes. No. Here we go. No. She's crying already. I hate you. Sophia laughed. You love me. The doors behind Daisy closed as several friends emerged from hiding. Surprise. The room erupted into cheers. Daisy burst into tears. Actual tears. Again. Pregnancy had officially ruined her dignity. Laughter filled the room. Music played softly. Friends and business associates mingled. For the first time in months, Daisy felt genuinely happy. Not because of Hart Corporation. Not because of the inheritance. Because she wasn't alone. People cared. People were excited for her. The realization warmed her heart. One by one, gifts began piling up. Tiny blankets. Tiny toys. Tiny clothes. Tiny shoes. 3 of everything. Because apparently everyone found triplets fascinating. Daisy opened another gift box. Inside were 3 tiny pairs of knitted baby shoes. The sight instantly shattered her. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Sophia groaned. Again. Daisy held up the shoes. They're so small. That's because babies are small. Daisy ignored her. The shoes fit in the palm of her hand. One day Daniel would wear them. One day Diana would wear them. One day Damien would wear them. The thought overwhelmed her. For years she had wondered if she'd ever have a family. Now she was getting 3 children at once. Life was unbelievable. Several hours later, the party ended. The guests slowly departed. The gifts were loaded into vehicles. The decorations began coming down. Finally, only Daisy and Sophia remained. Exhausted. Happy. Content. I think that was a success. Daisy smiled. It was perfect. Sophia nudged her. You deserve happiness, you know. The words caught her off guard. Daisy looked away. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Sophia sighed. I mean it. Her voice softened. You spent years fighting everyone. Daisy's smile faded slightly. Her father. Vanessa. The company. The inheritance. The loneliness. There had been many battles. Too many. But somehow these babies made every struggle feel worthwhile. She rested a hand on her stomach. A familiar kick greeted her. Then another. Then another. 3 distinct movements. 3 tiny lives. 3 reasons to keep going. Daisy smiled. They're active today. They're definitely yours. Why? Because they're stubborn. Daisy laughed. So are you. That's different. It isn't. The women dissolved into laughter. For a few precious moments, everything felt perfect. Meanwhile, several miles away, Anthony Green sat alone in his penthouse. The contrast couldn't have been greater. The massive apartment overlooked the city. Luxurious. Elegant. Silent. Painfully silent. A half-finished glass of whiskey sat beside him. The television played in the background. He wasn't watching it. His attention remained fixed on the rain beyond the windows. The city lights blurred behind droplets of water. A familiar loneliness settled over him. It happened more often these days. Especially at night. Especially when there was nobody waiting for him. No wife. No children. No family. Just empty rooms. His phone buzzed. A message from his grandfather. When are you coming to dinner this Sunday? Anthony typed a quick response. I'll be there. Then he put the phone away. Dinner. Another family gathering. Another reminder of everything he lacked. The thought exhausted him. Elsewhere, Martha N. George sat inside her apartment surrounded by documents. Medical records. Transfer logs. Authorization forms. Emails. The evidence kept growing. And so did her fear. Something wasn't right. She had already uncovered unauthorized access. Missing reports. Now she'd found something even more disturbing. Several infertility diagnoses appeared to have originated from facilities connected to the same network of physicians. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. Someone had manipulated Anthony's medical history. Repeatedly. 4 years. Martha stared at the evidence. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just about the IVF mistake anymore. This was something bigger. Much bigger. And if she was right, Anthony Green wasn't the only victim. A sudden knock at her door made her jump. Her heart nearly stopped. Silence. Then another knock. Slower this time. Martha froze. Nobody was supposed to be visiting. Nobody. The knocking continued. And for the first time since beginning her investigation, genuine fear settled into her bones. Someone had found her. And deep down, she knew it couldn't be a coincidence. Back at her penthouse, Daisy suddenly doubled over. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen. Her breath caught. The room tilted. Daisy. Sophia immediately rushed forward. Another pain struck. Stronger this time. Daisy gripped the arm of the couch. Fear flooded her chest. No. The word escaped automatically. Not the babies. Please, not the babies. Sophia's face went pale. We're going to the hospital. And for the first time since learning she was pregnant, Daisy was truly terrified. Because suddenly, the possibility of losing everything she loved felt frighteningly real. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Every bump in the road made Daisy flinch. Every minute felt like an hour. Sophia sat beside her in the back seat, gripping her hand tightly. Everything is going to be okay. Daisy wanted to believe her. She really did. But fear was slowly consuming her. The pain had started suddenly. And no matter how many times she told herself everything would be fine, the terrifying thought kept returning. What if something happened to the babies? The idea alone made her nauseous. I can't lose them. Sophia squeezed her hand harder. You won't. I can't. Her voice cracked. Tears filled her eyes. For months those babies had become her entire world. The inheritance no longer mattered. The company no longer mattered. Nothing mattered except them. And now she was terrified. Within minutes of arriving, Daisy was rushed into an examination room. Doctors moved quickly. Nurses checked monitors. Machines beeped around her. The atmosphere felt far too serious. She hated it. A young doctor carefully reviewed her charts. Then performed another scan. Several long minutes passed. Nobody spoke. Daisy's anxiety grew. Finally she couldn't take it anymore. Say something. The doctor looked up. His expression softened. The babies are okay. Relief hit her so hard she almost cried. The babies are fine. Yes. Daisy closed her eyes. Thank God. The doctor continued. However, her heart immediately stopped again. Sophia groaned. Doctors really love that word. The doctor smiled apologetically. You're carrying triplets. I know. That automatically places you in a high-risk category. Daisy swallowed. The doctor pointed at the scan. The babies are growing well. Relief. But your body is under tremendous strain. Fear. Relief. Fear. The emotional roller coaster was exhausting. What does that mean? The doctor folded his arms. It means you need to slow down. Daisy frowned. I already slowed down. Slow down more. Sophia laughed. I like him. The doctor ignored her. No unnecessary stress. Daisy immediately thought of Richard. Impossible. No overworking. Heart Corporation. Also impossible. No emotional drama. Now even Daisy laughed. Definitely impossible. The doctor wasn't amused. I'm serious. His voice became firm. The babies need you healthy. Silence filled the room. Daisy slowly nodded. Because he was right. For the first time in her life, she wasn't responsible only for herself. 3 tiny lives depended on her. And she would do whatever it took to protect them. Hours later, Daisy finally returned home. Exhausted. Emotionally drained. But grateful. The babies were safe. That was all that mattered. The city had long gone quiet. Moonlight streamed through the nursery windows. Almost without thinking, she wandered into the room. The 3 cribs stood silently in place. waiting for their future occupants. Daisy slowly sat in the rocking chair, then placed both hands over her stomach. For several moments she simply listened. The silence. The faint sounds of the city. The steady rhythm of her breathing. Then she spoke. Softly. Almost like a prayer. "You scared me today." A tiny kick answered. Tears immediately filled her eyes. "You really scared me." Another kick. Then another. As if all three babies were responding. Daisy laughed through her tears. A fresh wave of movement greeted her. She smiled. Despite everything. Despite the fear. Despite the uncertainty. Despite the battles waiting ahead. This was the happiest she had ever been. "I don't know what kind of mother I'll be." Her voice trembled. "But I'll try." The tears finally escaped. "I promise I'll try." She closed her eyes. "I'll protect you." Another kick. "I'll love you." More movement. "And no matter what happens." Her hand tightened protectively over her stomach. "I will never let anyone hurt you." The promise echoed softly through the nursery. A promise she fully intended to keep. Even if she had no idea how difficult that would become. Meanwhile, Martha and George sat frozen inside her apartment. The knocking had stopped 10 minutes ago. Yet she hadn't moved. Hadn't breathed normally. Hadn't relaxed. Not even once. Slowly, cautiously, she approached the front door. Silence. Nothing. Her hand trembled as she looked through the peephole. Nobody. The hallway was empty. Completely empty. Relief washed over her. Then she noticed something on the floor. An envelope. Her stomach dropped. She immediately opened the door and grabbed it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Nothing else. No signature. No explanation. No name. Just 6 words. "Stop asking questions, Martha." Her blood ran cold. Someone knew. Someone knew exactly what she had been investigating. And worse. Someone wanted her to stop. Immediately. For the first time since uncovering the clinic records, Martha genuinely considered walking away. Because suddenly this wasn't about ethics anymore. Or professional responsibility. Or doing the right thing. This was about survival. And deep down, she knew something terrifying. People only send warnings when they're afraid of what you know. Which meant she was getting closer to the truth. Far closer than she realized. The woman who knew too much. Martha and George didn't sleep. Not that night. Not after finding the note. Not after reading those 6 words over and over again. "Stop asking questions, Martha." The message sat on her dining table. Mocking her. Threatening her. Warning her. Every time she looked at it, a chill ran through her body. Someone knew. Someone had discovered her investigation. Someone was watching. The realization should have convinced her to stop. Instead, it had the opposite effect. Because innocent people didn't send threats. Guilty people did. The next morning, Martha arrived at the clinic earlier than usual. The corridors were nearly empty. Most employees hadn't arrived yet. Perfect. She headed directly toward the records department. For months she had followed procedures. Requested access. Asked permission. Waited patiently. No more. Now she wanted answers. Real answers. She logged into the system. Anthony Green's file appeared instantly. Martha stared at it. Then opened the access history. Her pulse quickened. There it was again. The pattern. The same names. The same administrators. The same doctors. Repeatedly accessing his records over 15 years. Far beyond normal. Far beyond reasonable. Far beyond coincidence. She opened another file. Then another. Then another. Every road led back to Anthony Green. And every answer created more questions. Until finally she found something. A document that shouldn't have existed. Her eyes widened. No way. The file had been archived. Hidden. Buried. Yet somehow it remained accessible. Martha opened it. Her hands began trembling. A fertility evaluation. Dated 14 years ago. The results clearly stated. Normal fertility markers. Martha froze. She read it again. Then again. And again. Normal fertility markers. The report directly contradicted every diagnosis Anthony Green had received since then. Her breathing accelerated. The room suddenly felt too small. Too warm. Too dangerous. If this report was genuine, then one of two things had happened. Either every doctor afterward had been wrong. Or someone had deliberately changed Anthony's diagnosis. And Martha knew which possibility was more likely. Across town, Anthony Green stood inside a luxury toy store. The situation made absolutely no sense. "Sir." Anthony blinked. The saleswoman smiled politely. He looked around. Toy trains. Stuffed animals. Board games. Children everywhere. Why was he here? Good question. The truth was embarrassing. Earlier that morning he had passed a father shopping with his daughter. The little girl had been laughing. The father had been smiling. And somehow Anthony had ended up here. Alone. Inside a toy store. At 35 years old. He almost laughed. This was pathetic. The saleswoman waited patiently. Anthony picked up a small stuffed bear. The toy fit perfectly in his hand. For a moment he imagined giving it to a child. His child. A son. A daughter. Someone who shared his smile. His eyes. His stubbornness. The image hurt. Anthony immediately returned the toy. "I'm sorry." The saleswoman looked confused. "For what?" "Nothing." Without another word, he left. But the ache followed him all the way home. Meanwhile, Daisy was trying very hard not to panic. Again. Bed rest. The doctor nodded. Partial bed rest. Sophia burst out laughing. Daisy glared at her. "This isn't funny." "It absolutely is." The doctor looked between them. Confused. Sophia pointed dramatically. "Do you know this woman?" The doctor blinked. "Not particularly." "She doesn't know how to sit still." Daisy folded her arms. "I can sit still." "No." "I can." "No." "I absolutely can." Sophia smiled. "When was the last time you relaxed?" Daisy opened her mouth. Then closed it. The room fell silent. The doctor nodded knowingly. "My point exactly." Daisy groaned. Apparently everyone had decided she needed supervision. The annoying part? Always. No matter how much she hated slowing down. That evening, Martha finally made her decision. The evidence had become too significant to ignore. Too dangerous to keep hidden. She opened her laptop. Then drafted an email. Not to the clinic. Not to management. Not to the police. To an investigative journalist. Someone she trusted. Someone who couldn't be bought easily. Someone who knew how to expose corruption. Her finger hovered above the send button. This was it. The point of no return. Once she sent the files, everything would change. The clinic. Anthony Green. The people behind the conspiracy. All of it. Her heart pounded. Then she clicked. Send. The email disappeared. Gone. Irreversible. For the first time in weeks, Martha felt relieved. Like a burden had finally lifted. Unfortunately, she wasn't the only person receiving messages that night. Inside a dark office overlooking the city, Victor Green answered a phone call. His expression remained calm. Until he heard the update. Then the color drained from his face. Are you certain? A pause. Victor slowly stood. His grip tightened around the phone. Find her. His voice had become ice cold. Immediately. The call ended. Silence filled the room. Victor stared out at the city lights. Because for the first time in 15 years, someone had found a crack in his lie. And if that crack widened, everything he had built would come crashing down. Including him. The penthouse was silent. Painfully silent. Anthony Green unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The lights automatically came on. The air conditioning hummed softly. Everything worked perfectly. Exactly as it should. Yet somehow the place never felt like home. It felt like a museum. Beautiful. Expensive. Empty. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city. The marble floors gleamed. The furniture had cost more than most people earned in years. But none of it mattered. Not tonight. Not after the day he'd had. Anthony loosened his tie and headed toward the kitchen. The house greeted him with the same thing it always did. Nothing. No voices. No laughter. No footsteps running down hallways. No children arguing over toys. Just silence. Endless silence. For a man who supposedly had everything, Anthony often felt like he had nothing. A few minutes later, he stood in front of a cabinet he rarely opened. The cabinet contained things he never showed anyone. Things he never talked about. Things he pretended didn't exist. For several moments he simply stared at it. Then he opened the door. Inside sat a small wooden box. Old. Worn. Forgotten. Anthony picked it up carefully. The moment he lifted the lid, memories flooded back. Painful memories. Hopeful memories. Memories from a younger version of himself. A version that had still believed in miracles. The contents were simple. A tiny pair of baby socks. A photograph of himself and his late grandmother. Several folded notes. And a list. A list he'd written years ago. Before the diagnosis had crushed every dream. Anthony slowly unfolded the paper. His own handwriting stared back at him. Names. Children's names. Names he had once imagined giving to his future son. His future daughter. The children he thought he would someday have. A bitter smile touched his lips. God. He had been so young. So hopeful. So foolish. His eyes moved down the list. Every name carried a dream. Every dream carried a future. A future that never happened. At least not according to the life he'd been given. Anthony leaned back against the counter. Suddenly exhausted. He should throw the box away. He knew that. Keeping it served no purpose. Yet every time he tried, he couldn't. Because destroying the box felt like destroying the last piece of hope he had left. His phone rang. Anthony glanced at the screen. Grandfather. Again. He answered. Hello. You're coming tomorrow. It wasn't a question. Anthony smiled slightly. Good evening to you too. Answer the question. I'll be there. Good. The old man sounded pleased. Then his tone softened. You've been isolating yourself. Not this conversation again. It needs to happen. No. Yes. Anthony rubbed his forehead. His grandfather could be relentless when he wanted something. And unfortunately, what he wanted was usually Anthony's happiness. A noble goal. An impossible one. You still have a life ahead of you. Anthony laughed quietly. Do I? The silence that followed felt heavy. His grandfather spoke carefully. As long as you're breathing, yes. Anthony looked around the empty penthouse. The empty rooms. The empty hallways. The empty future. I'm not sure that's enough anymore. The words escaped before he could stop them. Silence followed. Long. Painful silence. Then the old man's voice softened. Anthony. For a moment he sounded every bit his age. Tired. Concerned. Heartbroken. You've let one diagnosis define your entire life. Anthony closed his eyes. Maybe. But what was he supposed to do? Pretend it didn't matter. Pretend he wasn't lonely. Pretend he didn't want what everyone else seemed to have. A family. Children. Love. The simple things money couldn't buy. I have to go. Before his grandfather could respond, Anthony ended the call. He immediately felt guilty. But not enough to call back. Tonight he simply couldn't handle another conversation about hope. Later, unable to sleep, Anthony decided to walk. The city streets were quieter than usual. The night air felt cool against his skin. For nearly an hour he wandered without direction. Without purpose. Just walking. Thinking. Trying to outrun memories. Eventually he passed a small park. Children's laughter drifted through the darkness. Anthony slowed. A family occupied one of the benches. A mother. A father. 3 young children. The youngest boy couldn't have been older than 4. The child tripped while running. Immediately, the father stood. The little boy burst into tears. Within seconds he was lifted into strong arms. Comforted. Protected. Safe. The crying stopped almost immediately. Anthony stared. Unable to look away. Because the scene felt so ordinary. So normal. So simple. Yet it represented everything he had lost. Or thought he had lost. For several moments he watched the family. Then quietly continued walking. Unaware that somewhere across the city, a pregnant woman sat in a nursery rubbing her stomach. Unaware that 3 tiny hearts continued beating. Unaware that the future he believed impossible was already growing. Waiting. Getting closer with every passing day. And fate wasn't finished with Anthony Green yet.